Welcome to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well, broadcasting on KSQD Santa Cruz on 90.7 FM and live streaming at ksqd.org. I'm the producer and host, Deborah Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist, and my pronouns are she, her. The month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and to honor that, we decided to create this show exploring the question, what is your soul food? This show is about self-care, the many ways we can care for our bodies and minds to support our mental health. But it's also about much more than that. These soul food activities and practices also help us work through traumas, both large and small, and helps us be more resilient when facing life's many challenges. When we find ways to feed our own souls, we also find ourselves more resourced and therefore more available to be kind, feel compassion, and lend support to others in our family and communities. Finding and engaging with our soul foods helps us be our best selves. In this show, rather than having one guest share their lived experience, we'll instead be hearing from a group of community members about their specific soul food diets of choice. I'm also joined today by colleague and former State of Mind guest, psychotherapist Kara Bowman, and together we'll be discussing how these soul food choices can lead to improved mental and physical health. In response to our request for soul food stories from our listeners, we received so many audio contributions representing such an array of different approaches that we decided to make this into a two-part series so that we could share all of them with you and showcase a wide breadth of approaches to taking care of our minds and bodies and building resilience. So be sure to join us next month for Building Resilience, What's Your Soul Food, Part 2, to hear more. We hope today's show helps you learn more about how and why you may want to embellish your own soul food menu. My guest today, Kara Bowman, is a marriage and family therapist in private practice who's also an author, speaker, and trainer. Kara is a nonviolent communication trainer, certified grief counselor, and certified trauma therapist. Kara uses many modalities in her work, including focusing, which is self-connecting, compassion-based therapies, and neurobiology-informed therapies. Kara volunteers her time for many organizations, including Hospice of Santa Cruz County. Kara's passionate about using research-based methods to help people change lifelong patterns, even in the midst of difficult life events. Kara's self-care includes reading, learning, cooking, Pilates, walking, and compassion practices. Welcome, Kara. I'm just so glad you're here with us today to talk about this fun topic of soul food.
It's great to be here with you too, Deborah. Before we get started, I want to tell listeners a little bit more about you and how you go about feeding your soul. Your host, Deborah Sloss, is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 25 years of clinical experience. She's a certified DBT therapist and has extensive training in a variety of therapeutic modalities, including internal family systems and narrative therapy, among others. For more than 10 years, she served as a clinical supervisor at a local agency, teaching, mentoring, and supporting many of the therapists working in our community today. One of Deborah's mainstay soul foods is volunteering in her community. Whether it's creating and hosting this radio program to raise mental health awareness, designing and running a school arts enrichment program, volunteering for the National Alliance on Mental Health, or cooking up a pot of soup for delivery to community members facing health challenges or loss, Deborah can usually be found with her sleeves rolled up, cooking up something to share with her community. Her personal soul food diet includes swimming, time in nature, yoga, hikes with friends, gardening, and finding new ways to preserve the many fruits of her garden.
Thanks, Kara. Well, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. Let's dig in.
Okay. Well, in this show, we're going to be sharing a series of soul food audio contributions from our listeners. And after each, Kara and I are going to elaborate on why and how those soul food choices support physical and mental health and build resilience. So first off, I thought it would be good to define what mental health resilience is. In the Merriam-Webster dictionary, they define resilience as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. They also define it as the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, elasticity. So, in mental health, resilience is the ability to adapt to difficult situations. When stress, adversity, or trauma strikes, you still experience anger, grief, and pain, but you're able to keep functioning both physically and psychologically. So, that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to jump right in here and start off with our first soul food contribution by Cindy.
Hello, my name is Cindy, and I'm a mother of two boys, aged 20 and 17, and two boxers. Last year, I hopped on the trend and quit my job to take a gap year and think about what I wanted to do next. As a lifelong multitasker with borderline OCD, that left me with a lot of time on my hands and a possible opportunity to spin out of control in an effort to fill that void. One of my biggest fears has always been becoming irrelevant, so I feel anxious and isolated when the phone stops ringing. So this was a big transition. Now, I know it sounds incredibly basic, but the best way I've found to keep the gremlins at bay are exercise, eating right, doing good deed, and cuddling with my dogs. I thought about not even making this recording because none of those things are novel or new. But that said, I figure if I pile on another vote for the basics, it might serve as a good reminder. Benefits of exercise compound in multiple ways, right? I feel good about myself for showing up. Getting my heart rate up and getting a good sweat gives me energy. I know I sleep much better, and any good habit that you establish makes you realize that you can start another good habit. If you want to know the science behind the whole habit thing, check out the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He's got that pretty well nailed. Eating right has a lot of the same positive effects as working out, but it also allows you to think more clearly and gives you a sense of accomplishment and control. I've recently switched our family to mostly vegetarian at the request of our teenager, and it's amazing how good those recipes can be. Instead of having a meatless Monday, we now have a Meat Monday, since we only have it once a week. And if you're ever at a loss for good recipes, hop onto Pinterest and you'll have everything at your fingertips. As far as doing a good deed and those benefits, there's been a ton of research providing that nothing gives you a bigger lift than helping others. It doesn't have to take a ton of time or any money. Just something simple like trying to smile at the 5 people you see at the grocery store can make a difference. I happen to be a universal donor from a blood perspective because of my blood type. So when I really want to fill the bank, I donate. Now, obviously, I can't do that too often. On the dog front, I'm certainly not suggesting that one of you that you go get a dog if you aren't ready for that commitment. But if you do have a dog or a close friend with one, I highly recommend a few sessions a week where you chill out with one. They are the best model of how to really relax, and no person is ever going to be that happy to see you. So just listening to this podcast is a great start. So please know I'm sending positive thoughts your way. Have a great day.
So, Kara, I'm wondering if you have any responses about what you heard from Cindy.
That was just wonderful to hear. And she's absolutely right that research supports of all of that. I wanted to say a little bit about the animals. I was looking at research on animals, and I love researchers. They talked about HAIs, human animal interactions, and said that they had a positive effect on interpersonal interactions, mood, stress. They lowered anxiety, and they caused better mental and physical health. And then she's right about helping others, that can be so simple. She talked about smiling at someone, letting people who let someone in a car, just let another car in or hold open a door, actually feel positive mood effects for quite a while. So self-care doesn't have to be something big. It can be something very little. She touched on so many things that I'd like to just name really quickly. the 5 types of self-care. Catherine Hurst has named 5 types. One is sensory, which is ways to calm our mind. And Cindy mentioned that when she was talking about relaxing, cuddling with her dogs. There's emotional self-care, which is the sense of accomplishment, control, or filling the bank that she talked about. There's spiritual self-care, which can be a higher power, but it can also be just connecting with meaning and values and purpose. There's physical self-care. Cindy mentioned exercise and eating well. And then there's social self-care, which is nurturing and deepening relationships with other people. But with people who feel like they're introverts, it also may mean not overdoing it. And so doing good deeds could fall into both spiritual and social. So Cindy touched on all of those in what she had to say.
Well, that's wonderful, Kara. And I had similar thoughts listening to it. A couple of things that I just might add to it is, she talks about eating and eating right, and what you eat is important, but also just eating regularly is really important. And I know a lot of times when I work with my clients, I frequently find that they're not eating regularly, and doing that will help maintain, your blood sugar and also really support mood. And then the last thing that really stood out to me about what she said was the value of animals is not only the experience we have with them, but they also can really add structure to our lives. So, animals need to eat regularly. That can be a good cue sometimes for people to remember to eat as well, or that they need to get out on a walk. And so that can be a reason to get out and exercise. So I do find that a lot of my clients, their animals really help support their self-care practices and help them develop habits that are connected to the needs of their animals. With this next submission, we're going to hear from a young man who takes a very different and much more physical approach to his soul food.
My name is Zachary Greenberg. There are a few things that touch my soul the way cycling does. The bike can take me anywhere I'm looking to go, and it gives me the escape and release I need after being bunched up in the busy city. Cycling seems to grow with me wherever I go, whether it's in the Santa Cruz Mountains weaving in between redwood trees, or New York City weaving in between taxis and dog walkers. My partner and I moved to New York last year, and it's been a huge shift in both of our lives. Cycling looks a lot different here, but as a lot of things change around me, cycling stays constant. Cycling started out as being a form of fitness, but it's become more and more essential for my mental health. When I'm out riding, my heartbeat rises and falls. My head starts to clear out all the thoughts that cripple my mind. If I'm dealing with depressive or stressful feelings, I shift that energy into the pedals. It takes time for this tension to ease, but within the first 10 to 15 miles, I'm at ease. At times I feel that I'm in a lucid state, either from the enjoyment of riding and what's around me, or simply my low caloric intake. When getting back from a ride, I can feel a significant difference in my temper, patience, and tolerance for what comes next.
Wow. So, Kara, any reactions to what Zach had to share?
That's wonderful that he's found that. I appreciate him sharing that with us. I love that he mentions that he has more patience and tolerance and resilience, as you mentioned. So exercise releases endorphins and dopamine, and both of those enhance mood, and both of those stay in our systems well after the exercise is done. And you can even change your set point by regular exercise. Research shows that exercise can reduce depression, improve mood, decrease anxiety, and even build self-esteem. So I'm going to be quoting a lot of research, and I'll put the links to the research in the show notes. So if people want to see what I'm quoting, they can look that up for themselves. So I just want to quickly mention that there are 3 emotional regulation systems and 3 things we can do with emotions. One is we can feel the feelings and process them. And we can't actually do that all the time. If we did that all the time, we would be overwhelmed. Another thing we can do is distract ourselves. Some people use television or other things to distract themselves from feelings. And the third thing is replenishing ourselves, and that's filling the emotional gas tank. And that's what Zachary so beautifully described, that he actually feels replenished from exercise and more resilient and has more emotional strength. And so those are the three general categories of how we can deal with emotions, and we need all three of them in our lives.
Also, he mentions, just the physical part of it. And actually, when we're moving our bodies, we're increasing oxygen intake, we're flushing the bloodstream of stress hormones. So he talks about the state that he feels after he does that and how different it is. And I think a lot of the things we're going to be talking about today and in next month's show have that feature to them, about actually flushing the bloodstream of stress hormones and, getting new oxygen, fresh flow, getting the flush of sweating even is considered a way of cleansing oneself. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about sweating. It does speed up our metabolism, so it might speed up the processing of the stress hormones out of our body. But our body actually processes stress hormones in time, and noradrenaline and adrenaline have a half-life of just 90 seconds or so. I'm sorry, 45 seconds or so. So in 90 seconds or so, we can work those out of the body if we don't produce more. But cortisol actually has a much longer half-life. So exercise is long enough that you can wait and the cortisol will work itself out of your body. And if you're producing things that produce good mood, oxytocin and endorphins and dopamine, and then you're not producing more of the stress hormones, then the body will process the stress hormones out and produce things that elevate mood.
And that's part of what happens in almost all physical exercise, right?
Absolutely. And many of the other self-care that we talk about.
You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD Santa Cruz, K-Squid, many voices, one station. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here with my guest for today's show, psychotherapist Kara Bowman. We're exploring the question, what is your soul food? And we're hearing directly from a group of our listeners and community members about their specific soul food diets of choice, and discussing how these soul food choices build resilience and can lead to improved mental and physical health. Stay with us and we'll be right back after this brief message from our underwriter.
KSQD thanks Family Service Agency of the Central Coast for supporting this program. Family Service Agency provides counseling and support for people of all ages facing life crises and challenges. You can reach them at 423-9444 to see if they can help you. Thank you, Family Service Agency of the Central Coast, for supporting KSQD 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. So, coming back from the break, I'm excited to share this next audio piece, as all of you will soon see why. This one is from an 86-year-old woman who happens to be particularly special to me. She also takes a uniquely pragmatic approach to some hard challenges life has presented her, and seems to really know how to cook herself up a healthy serving of soul food.
Hi, my name is Go, and I'm mom to Deborah Sloss, your host. I'm 86 years old, so obviously I've lived long enough to have weathered many storms and experienced joyful highs. I lost my adorable husband 6 years ago after 40 years of adventurous marriage. 2 years later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a mastectomy. That was the point where I realized I was truly alone and no longer had my sweetheart to share the support through sickness and in health. I wasted no time deciding what would make my life joyful again. I missed my friends, so many of them were ill or dead, and I needed new, young, healthy friends. Also, I missed playing rummikub with my honey. I put notices on meetup.com and nextdoor.com, and I met several new friends for playing games and for dining out on sushi, my favorite food. I began giving games night at my home twice a month. Then the pandemic hit. A new friend and I set up Zoom games every Sunday evening, and we played online for 18 months. As soon as everyone was vaccinated, we began meeting again in person. And because some of our Zoom gamers have relocated, we still play online. And speaking of Zoom, my daughters live in 3 different states. So since the pandemic began, we meet on Zoom every Sunday morning, and I get to see more of them than ever. I love my computer and my iPhone. They are my link to the world. I write humorous journals, and I send them to friends and family, and I get appreciative feedback from it. It keeps me in touch with friends near and far. My brother and sister are also in their 80s, and we meet every Thursday for bowling and lunch afterwards. We laugh and joke about our childhood and our declining bowling scores. I'm an avid reader, so although libraries were closed, those little free libraries in the neighborhood kept me supplied with interesting books. So what's my joy? Keeping an active mind and building new friendships makes life fun and interesting. Social contact is very important to me, and so is laughter. I keep my social calendar on my iPhone, and I feel happy every day when I wake up to a new plan. These mental, social, and physical activities are definitely my soul food. What's most important is that I made it all happen.
Deborah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this one, since this is near and dear to your heart.
Yes, it is near and dear to my heart. You know, there's so many things that she talks about that really jump out to me. One of them is, the role of courage and risk in our self-care, like the willingness to put ourselves into new situations, to try new things sometimes. And, in doing that, she has made new friends, as many of her friends have become ill or passed away. So that really stood out to me. Also, a person of her age embracing technology as a means to staying connected to others, that really impressed me. And again, I think that's a way that she keeps her mind active and stays in connection with others. And I think earlier, Cara, you were talking about the importance of connection with others for our health and well-being. But, one of the biggest things that I know about my mom is that she loves to play. We often forget the importance of it, and play is something that's done for its own sake. It's voluntary, it's pleasurable, it offers a sense of engagement, and it takes us out of time. The act itself is more important than the outcome when we play. And I think we'll come back to this in some of the other recordings that we hear, but play can be a really important factor of feeling happy and joy, and therefore staying well. I wonder if you want to elaborate on any of those points or add the research perspective to them.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. I want to elaborate on all of them, but first I want to say what a joy and delight your mother is. The play point is really a wonderful point, and I'm thinking about all of the cultural messages that go against play. We grow up with all kinds of messages about wasting time and being productive that really make us feel like we're doing something wrong if we're playing. And really, human beings are not machines, and we're not computers. We are organic beings, and organic beings need play, need rest, need connection in a way that machines do not. And your mother seems to have figured that out. And the connecting part, I want to say that isolation is such a big risk factor because it does cause stress, and actually is as big a risk factor as smoking. It causes mortality in the same rates as smoking. So that's how serious isolation can be.
Thank you so much for making those distinctions. There's a couple more things that stood out to me. At the end, Go says, "I made it happen." And I want to talk about personal agency. We will also hear as a theme, I think, throughout the soul food contributions, is that ability to actually affect your own state, to improve how you feel when you're feeling poor, and to be able to exercise that sort of agency to make something better for yourself is a very empowering and health supportive stance. And it doesn't come easily for everyone. I know that in my work, that's something I'm often working with my clients on, is how to access and feel that sense of agency that they can affect their own lives. You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD, K-Squid, community radio for the Monterey Bay. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. You can find the podcast of all our shows on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, on the KSQD website, and on your home smart speaker. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here with my guest, psychotherapist Kara Bowman. We're exploring the question, what is your soul food? What are the things listeners do to meet their mental health and wellness needs? We're hearing directly from a group of community members about their specific soul food diets of choice and discussing how these soul food choices builds resilience and leads to improved mental and physical health. I also want listeners to know that every State of Mind show has a resource list posted along with the show. There you can find and listen to all the soul food recordings you're hearing today, including a few extras, and a whole collection of great soul food resources that have been suggested by our contributors and guests. These resources run the whole gamut, from books to websites to places to hike, dance classes, self-care suggestions, research references, and helpful apps. I strongly suggest you check out that great resource list at ksqd.org/state of mind. Now, back to our interview. All right, so our next contributor, Leslie, is facing one of the hardest kinds of loss, and yet she's still been figuring out how to find meaning and purpose while nurturing and feeding her soul every day.
Hi, my name is Leslie. I have a 27-year-old daughter who manages her mental wellness with passion and energy that inspires me. Sadly, I lost my son Ben when he was 29 to suicide in early 2021, following a journey with a mental health condition that erupted in 2018. The day Ben left us, he took a part of me with him, and I'm learning to be emotionally resilient in my grief every day. My life will never be the same, yet I have a responsibility to live it full in spite of my loss, as I know that is the best way to honor him now. I love food, so I have a 4-course meal offering for myself on the soul food menu. Walks in nature, followed by staying socially connected, with a main course of volunteer teaching with National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, and a closing serving of good sleep. Totally underrated. My main course is currently volunteer teaching the Ending the Silence workshop for local middle and high school age kids. It's about ending the misconceptions of mental illness and sharing that it is common, treatable, and if you learn the warning signs, you can take action, become a friend, and help yourself. We need to end stigma and begin talking about this. I started teaching for NAMI in 2019 after experiencing the benefit of the organization personally when I became the loved one of a family member with mental illness. When Ben was a feisty teenager, he told me that when I did nice things for others or volunteered, that I did it for myself and not for them. He was partly right, of course, a therapist before his time, or a contrarian, which is more likely. He loved a good debate. My current volunteer work is hugely powerful in my healing. The need to talk about mental health is unquestionable, as is the need to offer more resources to the growing number of youth who are struggling. I've always said, it's better to light one candle than complain about the dark. And this work helps me surround the ambiguity of mental health conditions and try to help others to have empathy towards those who are challenged by them. Ben was right in that this soul food is also good for me. The emotion that overwhelms me the most is sadness. I've come to call the waves of grief, which present less often and less severely than they did initially, the grief monster. It's crazy how unpredictable the onset of a visit by the grief monster can be. Finding a balance of not becoming consumed by the topic of mental health, which could be stifling in my effort to live my life full, but keeping it front and center enough to be reminded of the things that are so important in fostering acceptance and feeling less alone and overwhelmed. My teaching is my own reminder of what I need to do to take care of my mental health. Just like physical health, I have to do the work and learn what exercises work best for me to thrive and take on the grief monster when he shows up. Beach walks, friends and family, volunteer teaching, and a good night's sleep. That's a soulful meal any day.
I just love that piece. And Kara, I'm wondering, when it comes to grief, you really are the expert on that. And I'm wondering if maybe you want to lead here.
Oh, yes. I can't say more about grief than Leslie can. For all my years of working in grief, I think Leslie has shown that you have to find your own path and connect to what works for you. There are many people, she really talks about finding a passion, and there are many people who would look at what she's doing and say, I could never do that. And yet this is what makes her blossom, and this is what feeds her soul. And so she is really a great example of learning to do what works for yourself. And I like to teach people to replace the question of what should I do with the question of what do I need? And if they ask that question and check in with themselves, they'll find their own passion. It should be self-care should be supportive and uplifting and regenerating, not a slog and a chore and another thing to check off of your list. So Leslie so beautifully said, this is good for me. And I think self-care should feel like that. And so that can take some trial and error and some practice. And as we change, what's good for us can change. I'm sure she's a different person now than before she lost her son. And I'm sure what feeds her now is different.
Thank you, Kara. I really want to come back to that point about what you're saying, that self-care is more like scaffolding than it is like something that we, push ourselves to do. And one of the ways that I sometimes talk with people about that is really listening for a pull from the heart versus a shove from behind. And that often really helps people orient to that difference in, even if they might do the same activity, they often can orient around how they do that activity from a different place. We'll hear more about that, I think, from some other contributors later about how they change their relationship to the same activity, even if they might do the same thing. The other thing that really stood out to me about Leslie's sharing was that she has chosen to make a helpful meaning and create purpose out of a tragic loss. I think I've heard you, Kara, sometimes talk about post-traumatic growth, and that sometimes it can take a long time to find that meaning and to, find purpose. But that also is something that is available to people sometimes from even the worst of times in their life. And, for example, she says she found that it's her responsibility to live her life fully in order to honor her son. And that's a meaning shaping that is really supporting her in her taking care of herself.
Absolutely. Post-traumatic growth comes from choosing to do something a different way, and that's aligned with meaning and values. And she definitely did that. Yeah. And your mother also did that. She chose to do something a different way, and that gave her that sense of empowerment, I think. And
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing Leslie talks about is time in nature. And I just wanted to mention that this time I'm going to pull out the research and let people know that even 5 minutes around trees or green spaces tends to improve health. It's been found to increase immunity, mood, energy, the ability to focus, even in children with ADHD, even speed surgery recovery, and improve sleep. And it's been shown to decrease blood pressure and stress. So, we'll hear that theme repeating too from many of our guests, that time in nature can be very restorative for them. You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD, K-Squid, many voices, one station. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here with my guest, psychotherapist Kara Bowman. We're hearing directly from a group of our listeners and community members about their specific soul food diets of choice, and discussing how these soul food choices build resilience and lead to improved mental and physical health. So stay with us and we'll be right back after this brief message from our underwriter.
KSQD thanks Santa Cruz County Department of Parks, Open Space, and Cultural Services for supporting State of Mind. Santa Cruz County Parks Department offers a host of beaches, parks, and trails, and provides a biannual activity guide featuring recreational classes and cultural programs for all ages. More information or how to get involved at scparks.com. Thank you, Santa Cruz County Department of Parks, Open Space, and Cultural Services for supporting community radio K-Squid 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. So coming back from the break, I just love this next audio piece we're going to share with you that we received from another radio programmer here at KSQD. Each time I hear it, it just makes me want to open my mouth and, well, you'll see for yourself. Here's Suki.
My name is Suki. I am a writer and an online educator. My soul food is music. I grew up with music all around me. My mom was a piano teacher, and all my siblings studied at least one instrument. We were all at some point in orchestra or band or part of a rock band, and we had a pile of well-worn records that ranged from the Renaissance to Billy Idol. For a while when I was a young adult, I thought I'd like to try to be a professional musician, and I was disappointed in myself for not pursuing that. Music wasn't really soul food at that point because of my sense of disappointment. Raising children changed my perspective. I realized that our culture doesn't cherish amateurism as it should. So many kids would tell me that they couldn't sing, but of course, everyone can sing. We don't have to be professionals to make joyful noise. Now that my children are grown, making music feeds my soul in a valuable way. If I've had a hard day, I might be tempted to sit down and watch a video, but I feel much better if I sing instead. Singing is a full body, full mind experience. People sometimes ask if I meditate, and I answer, no, I sing. I love to sing old songs because they make me feel connected to all the people who have sung those songs through the ages. As a parent, I really can't think of a more important gift that we can give our children than the gift of music just for the sake of pleasure. I know that when I was young, I was focused way too much on music as a public act or as a product. Now I am happy to sing, whether or not anyone is listening.
So I'd love to hear your reaction to that, Deborah.
Well, one of the things that I really appreciate about what Suki's saying is this idea of doing something for the sake of doing it, really unhooking from the idea that we have to make a neatly, perfect product. And I remember years ago being interested in meditation and hearing about non-striving, and I really didn't get it. I didn't understand what they were talking about. This is really what they're talking about. It's just really engaging in something for the act of engaging and for the experience that it gives you while you're doing it. And so I love that she brings that up. And I think that that's a theme we see throughout the soul food activities that a lot of people talk about. The other thing about making music is that it's a connection, it's a communication, it's a way of being with people. So she certainly is talking about, that experience too. And, when she's talking about that non-striving, it really makes me think about the value of doing something that you may not be good at and just doing it because you enjoy it and how that kind of can enrich our lives. I had that experience myself trying to make music. I'm not a natural by any means, but it was so liberating to me to actually do something badly and enjoy it anyways. And again, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, which is, shifting that mindset about the relationship we have to it. So instead of thinking of it as a product that's for others, thinking about it as the experience that you're having yourself and how it fills you up when you're doing it. Thinking about her piece got me to remember my grandfather. He used to call himself, he was a woodworker, and he used to call himself the wood butcher. And we all laughed about that. But all of a sudden, listening to Suki and thinking about this, I realized that part of that is because he was really trying to unhook from this idea that he had to be great and just great at it. And, I think about what he looked like when he was in his wood shop, and he just looked full of joy and peace. And, I remember what he looked like when he would be oiling a bowl that he made on his lathe and how happy he seemed. And, he would be humming to himself while he was in there. And, I think that that's one of those places where time gets suspended, is another theme we're hearing about. And you're engaged in something purely for the joy of doing it.
Thank you for bringing that in, Deborah, because what I'm thinking about when you're describing your grandfather and when Suki's describing her relationship to music is just the word presence. When you're doing something for pure enjoyment, you're present. And I think that's a theme throughout a lot of these. Presence is very good for us. So there's a lot of research on music, and it's beginning to sound like a broken record, so to speak. It reduces stress, helps manage pain, improves sleep, improves mood, motivation, and reduces depression. There's also this connection to people who have sung throughout the ages or to common humanity. And the Buddhists have a saying, may all beings be happy. And I think they came upon that, and the self-compassion research has actually proven that there is something to that. When the components of self-compassion were researched, a connection to common humanity was a piece of self-compassion. So when people felt connected to the humanity of others and part of a greater community, either throughout time or throughout the world, then that improved mood.
Do you have any other examples of how people might experience that besides through prayer and singing?
Prayer and singing. One is just perspective. When you have feelings, remembering that other people have felt this way. When you're mourning, remembering other people have mourned. One is through helping others. I think also just bringing that into your consciousness can do that. Yeah.
Well, next up, we're going to hear a soul food piece who builds on a couple of the themes that we've heard so far and introduces an important new one.
Hello, my name is Gabriel, and I am the father of 5 children who are all adults now, 3 by birth, 2 by adoption, and 4 grandchildren. I've been working for over 40 years in counseling for mental health, grief and loss with hospice and trauma in the United States and elsewhere. And one thing that's always helped me to be present and to continue doing that type of support for people has been mindful meditation. It started when I was about 16, and I used to go to a Zen monastery, and it's the one thing that has always stayed with me and helped ground me in the midst of sometimes very traumatic changes or events, or with people who are experiencing such. And that, plus more recently, since retiring, playing music and singing with friends with ukulele. So many people found this to be of help, especially the meditation part. So I hope that helps, and thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.
Wonderful. So Gabrielle introduces this new idea of mindful meditation as a self-care activity, and how it's really helped ground him and face, first off, raising 5 children, and then also through many difficult and traumatic events in his life. Cara, this is another area that you probably have a lot to say about.
My children would say that's every area. I do, and I'm so glad he brought in meditation. In meditation, the pattern of brainwaves lasts long after the activity, and that's one of the reasons that it's so helpful. And it reduces anxiety, depression, it helps with insomnia, many other things. A lot of people say they can't meditate, and that's actually true. He talked about it helping him through hard times, and a meditation practice is wonderful if you have the practice in place before the hard times hit. When you're in the midst of hard times, it's a very bad time to start a silent meditation practice, because what fills the silence? Very difficult thoughts. So if you're going through a difficult time, or you're grieving, or you've had a traumatic incident, it's a better time to do audio visualizations or audio relaxations. And so visualizations are things like scripts about beautiful places you might be that are relaxing, and relaxations are things more like muscle relaxation in your body or breathing. So those are more helpful if you're going through difficult times, rather than silent meditation. If you already have a silent meditation practice in place, then those can be, I think he called them grounding through difficult times. They can be Pavlovian, where your body gets used to relaxing and going into this brainwave state that's relaxing, and your relaxation hormones can start flowing once you start meditating.
We have one more audio contributor to hear from. And what really stood out to me about this one is that sometimes you just can't do it alone. This next piece from Emma is a great example of that.
Hey everyone, my name's Emma, and I've been an active member of Al-Anon for the last 6 years and an anxious bunny for most of my 37 years of life. A few years ago, I was detailing my new partner's behavior to my sponsor and worrying. At some point, she kindly said to me, "Honey, your problem isn't what he's doing or not doing. Your problem is that you have anxiety, and the solution is to learn to tend to your own anxiety." The sentence was transformative for me. It placed my problem in its true perspective with a focus on me and what is in my control. There are some obvious things that help my mental health. Getting enough sleep, drinking water, moving my body, spending time in nature. These are all essential bites of my soul food. And then there are a few slightly more advanced but still simple ones that I'm going to share with you all today. The first is my mindfulness practice, and I don't mean the time that I spend sitting on a cushion meditating. This is much simpler than that. My mindfulness practice is just me checking in with myself a few times throughout the day. How am I feeling? How does my body feel? I do this first thing in the morning, pretty much any time that I'm in the car, and when I arrive home after work. This simple practice puts me on my priority list each day. Making this intentional time and space for my own feelings has helped me to know and care for myself better. And my feelings are just helpful information. Oh, I'm really tired and overwhelmed? Good to know. Maybe I could tend to that now instead of waiting until I snap at my partner later for leaving their socks on the floor. The second practice is saying no. And to be clear, this one is really where progress, not perfection, is important because I'm definitely not perfect at this. As a recovering people pleaser, I am most comfortable saying yes to everyone and everything. And I can't. That's just not how time works, and overcommitting isn't good for my mental health. So, when I'm asked to do anything, from a project at work to a social gathering, I practice saying, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Let me get back to you about my availability." Then I check my schedule and check in with myself. Does the thought of doing the thing make me feel energized, excited, passionate? Does my schedule really allow for it? Then I'm in. Does it make me feel drained or stressed? The rule is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. The last one is scheduling me time on my calendar and then keeping that appointment. This time is unstructured, unscheduled, free. Do I want to go for a hike, paint, read a book, sit on my couch and stare out the window? Before recovery, I was so busy anticipating everyone else's needs and going along with what they liked that I forgot to learn what I like to do. This time helps me to learn about myself. I do a 3-hour chunk each week. I put it on my schedule, and this is the hard part, I have to treat it like it's a real appointment. My self-talk around it is, you're not available during that time, you're busy hanging out with and taking care of someone. Me. I deserve time and space and care for myself. And that's it. Those are my 3 most important bites of soul food. Thank you so much.
I just love that. She really packs a lot in there. But, to my point that I made in the introduction, sometimes we can't do it alone. And I really like this as an example that she's willing to get help and support from her Al-Anon support group and also from her sponsor. Sometimes we can get help from a peer mentor, friends, family, elders, siblings, clergy, mentors, and also therapists sometimes. And all of those people can serve as that kind of support when we kind of can't access maybe all that we need to on our own.
And I really loved this for her talk about self-connection, because really, isn't that what all of this self-care is? It's not going to work if we're not self-connected, if it's not feeding our souls. And she talked about how self-connection doesn't have to be a big act. It can just be a small checking in. And she also talked about how she checks in not with her brain, but her body. So emotions are held in the body, and the words for emotions are just language we slap on the physical sensations. And she actually checks in with the physical sensations rather than what she's thinking. So I love her example of that. I also wanted to reframe a little bit her saying no. So we have this cultural idea that there's a zero sum, that when one person says no, when one person wants you to do something and you say no, that they have lost. And I'd like to reframe that as there's always a yes behind the no. Whenever you say no, it's because you're saying yes to something else. You're saying yes to rest. You're saying yes to balance in your life. You're also saying yes to not doing something and resenting the other person later. So if you look at it that way, as a holistic request, what is it going to do if I say yes to this request? It may be better for both you and the other person for you to say no. And I found a lot of times if you say no, but share your intention, then it can actually be connecting. Emma also talks about changing lifelong patterns in brain wiring by thinking differently. So she talked about valuing herself by checking in with herself, valuing her feelings, valuing her needs. And by doing that repeatedly, that's actually how you change your brain wiring. So neurons wire together when they're used repeatedly, brain pathways used repeatedly. And by repeating these actions over and over and over again, she's changing her brain in a more supportive, better way.
I'm just so moved as I listen to each of these stories again. Each is a powerful reminder about the creativity and individuality of the human spirit. They also serve as a strong example of the resilience capacity that lies within all of us. Everyone who shared their soul food menus with us today are showing us that while we all have that capacity to meet challenges and recover from traumatic experiences, we also need to nurture ourselves and feed our souls so that when the time comes, we can actually find that resilience. We hope today's show might help inspire you to pay close attention to your own self-care needs, and that the stories you've heard offer models and ideas for ways you might cook up your own full-bodied soul food menu. This is part 1 of a 2-part series. Next month, you'll get to hear more great ideas and deep wisdoms being shared by a whole new group of community members about the ways in which they've found to feed their souls. So be sure to join us again next month for part 2 of Building Resilience. What's your soul food? I want to say a huge thank you to my guest today, Kara Bowman, and also to our contributors for submitting their very special soul food audio pieces. And thanks to you for joining us here on State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. To hear more conversations about mental health and wellness, join us on the first Sunday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. right here on K-Squid 90.7 FM. Special thanks to Jeannie Baldzikowski for audio production, to Jennifer Young for research and outreach, to Leslie Nielsen for outreach, and to Izzy Weiss for marketing. And thanks to acoustic guitarist Adrian Legg for composing, performing, and donating the use of our theme music. You can find all the past episodes of this show on our ksqd.org website by typing State of Mind in the search bar. Listen or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. Or listen through your home smart speaker by saying Play State of Mind Podcast with Deborah Sloss on TuneIn. In Your Voice are short segments where listeners get to add their voice to the discussion. You can either call in to leave a message or record an audio file right on your phone. Either way, tell us about a mental health experience you've had, something that's contributed to your mental health recovery, or share a resource that's helped you. Submission details can be found at ksqd.org/state of mind. We're now looking for In Your Voice contributions for 2 upcoming shows. The first is about mental health recovery following a traumatic brain injury. We're also working on a show looking at the mental health impacts of climate change. If you have experience with either of these, we want to hear from you, and your voice may just be on one of our future shows. This is listener-supported community radio, KSQD Santa Cruz. Just remember, 90.7 FM, K-Squid, your ink spot on the dial. Now stay with us.